Megan Wilson's fingers traced the outline of the electrical tape holding her work shoes together. 6 months of daily repairs in the synthetic leather still surrendered a little more each day. She pressed harder, trying to seal the edge that had separated during her morning shift. The gray tape against black shoes wasn't noticeable unless someone was looking. People were always looking. Outside her apartment window, snow began falling again. The third storm this week, each one colder than the last. The radiator in the corner clicked and wheezed, but offered little warmth. The electricity bill on the kitchen counter showed a past due balance highlighted in aggressive red, $217. The number that had kept her awake the previous night. Lily's voice echoed from the bedroom they shared. At 12, she was still young enough to find excitement in the snow, old enough to understand they couldn't afford to turn up the heat. She stood in the doorway now, wearing 3 layers of clothing, breath visible in the apartment air. School's canceled tomorrow. Too much ice on the roads. Megan nodded, calculating quickly. Another day of missed work. Another day of lost wages. Another impossible choice between heat and food. The diner where she worked mornings wouldn't hold her shift if she couldn't make it in. Marcus had made that clear last week when she'd been 20 minutes late after the car broke down. No excuses, Megan. I've got 10 people who'd take your spot in a heartbeat. She pushed herself up from the kitchen table, wincing at the pain in her lower back. 5 hours on her feet this morning at the diner, another 6 hours stacking shelves at the grocery store still ahead. She'd been doing the double shift routine for 3 years now, ever since the divorce. Lily held up her math homework eyes, searching for approval. Megan studied the neat rows of equations, amazed at her daughter's precision despite everything. Despite the cold apartment, despite the too small bedroom, despite the school supplies purchased from the dollar store while classmates carried designer backpacks, despite having a mother who was always either working or exhausted. This looks perfect, honey. The equations are balanced perfectly. Megan's phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Bill collectors called from different numbers now, a tactical adaptation to her screening system. They'd leave threatening messages about court appearances and wage garnishment, legal terms designed to terrify people already living on the edge. In the bathroom, Megan splashed cold water on her face and stared at the mirror. 35 years old, the fine lines at the corners of her eyes had deepened this year. Her brown hair, once her pride, now hung limp and overdue for a cut she couldn't afford. She'd stopped wearing makeup months ago. Another small economy, saving both money and precious morning minutes. Behind her reflection, she could see the bathtub with its rust stains and dripping faucet. The landlord had promised to fix it last spring. She'd stopped asking by summer. The phone buzzed again, same unknown number. Persistent. She silenced it and slipped it back into her pocket. The grocery store uniform hung on the back of the door, faded navy blue with a stitched name tag that read Megan. Generic. Replaceable. The second job she'd taken after discovering her cashier wages from the first wouldn't cover rent, let alone everything else. The car keys felt heavy in her hand. The ancient Chevy sedan had nearly 200,000 miles and made a grinding noise whenever she turned left. Each morning she whispered the same desperate prayer as she turned the key. Today the engine caught, but the sound was rougher than yesterday. Lily sat in the passenger seat, backpack clutched to her chest. The no-school announcement meant she'd come to the grocery store, sit in the break room doing homework until closing. It had happened often enough that the manager no longer commented. Single mothers weren't entitled to snow days. They were 3 blocks from the apartment when the check engine light flashed red, followed by an ominous mechanical stutter. Steam began rising from beneath the hood. Megan guided the dying vehicle to the curb before it stopped completely. The finality of the silence when she turned the key again made her stomach clench. Not now, please, not now. Lily stared straight ahead, her small face a mask of adult resignation no 12-year-old should have perfected. Megan felt the familiar wave of inadequacy washing over her. This wasn't the life she'd wanted for her daughter. This wasn't the mother she'd planned to be. She tried the engine again. Nothing. The snow fell faster now, already accumulating on the windshield. Her phone showed 15 minutes until her shift started. No money for a tow truck. No friend close enough to call for a ride. No choice but to start walking and arrive late, risking the manager's wrath and possible termination. Megan rested her forehead against the steering wheel for a moment of surrender before the responsibility of motherhood pulled her upright again. She turned to tell Lily they needed to walk when a knock on her window made them both jump. A man stood beside the car, shoulders hunched against the snow. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered, with the weathered complexion of someone who worked outdoors. His expression showed concern rather than threat. Megan lowered the window just enough to hear him. "Car trouble, need a hand." The words were friendly, his tone matter-of-fact. In the passenger seat, Lily sat up straighter, studying the stranger with curiosity rather than fear. A good sign. Megan had learned to trust her daughter's instincts about people. The man introduced himself as Jack Reynolds. He owned the garage 3 blocks down. "Been watching the smoke from your hood while shoveling my parking lot." Within minutes, Jack had the hood open, methodically checking components while snow gathered on his shoulders. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who understood machines intimately, who could diagnose problems by sound and touch. Megan stood beside him, arms wrapped around herself for warmth, watching as he identified the issue: a blown radiator hose. "I can patch it temporarily, get you where you're going, but it needs proper replacement soon. Maybe real soon." His eyes, remarkably blue against his tan skin, held no judgment. No pity either, just practical assessment. He returned to his truck for tools and supplies while Megan called the grocery store, explaining she'd be late. The assistant manager was unsympathetic. "Third time this month, Wilson. One more and we're having a serious conversation." Jack worked quickly, efficiently, his breath clouding in the frigid air. When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag that appeared from his pocket and gave simple instructions. "Drive carefully, no heat, straight to your destination. Come by the garage tomorrow if you can." When Megan asked what she owed him, he shook his head. "Pay me when you get the proper fix." He glanced at Lily, who watched wide-eyed from the passenger seat. "Or maybe your assistant there can help me organize my filing system someday. It's a disaster." The gesture was small but overwhelming in its kindness. Megan blinked rapidly, refusing to let emotion surface. She'd learned that gratitude could too easily become tears, and tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in front of her daughter. Instead, she thanked him with a nod that conveyed more than words could express. The car started on the first try. As they pulled away, Lily turned to look back at Jack, who stood in the falling snow watching them go. "He seems nice, Mom, like someone from before." Before. The word hung between them. Before the divorce, before the downward spiral, before life became an endless calculation of insufficient resources. Megan arrived at the grocery store 22 minutes late. The assistant manager made a show of checking his watch as she rushed to clock in. Lily settled quietly in the break room with her books. Another night of homework under fluorescent lights while her mother stocked shelves and worked the register. The shift dragged by in a haze of repetitive motion. Stack scan bag, smile reflexively at customers who barely looked at her. Megan's back ached and her mind kept returning to the car. A proper repair would cost at least $300 she didn't have. The apartment was 14 degrees below comfortable. Lily needed new winter boots. Impossible equations with no solution. Her phone vibrated again during her break. The same unknown number that had called twice earlier. Irritated, expecting a debt collector, Megan finally answered. "Is this Megan Wilson?" The female voice was professional, unfamiliar. Megan confirmed her identity cautiously. "This is Jennifer Daniels from Daniels & Associates Legal Services. I'm calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Matthews. I understand she was your great aunt." Megan froze, the break room suddenly very quiet around her Aunt Eleanor. A distant figure glimpsed perhaps twice in childhood. Family gatherings where the adults whispered about the eccentric old woman who lived alone in the mountains. A tall, silver-haired figure who rarely spoke but watched everything with piercing eyes. "Ms. Wilson." "Are you there?" "Yes," Megan managed. "Eleanor Matthews was my grandmother's sister. I haven't seen her since I was a child. I'm sorry to inform you that Ms. Matthews passed away 3 weeks ago. You've been named in her will. We've been trying to reach you. The reading is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Megan's grip tightened on the phone. Tomorrow, Tuesday, both jobs. Lily, no car, an impossibility. I can't make it tomorrow. I work. I have responsibilities. The lawyer's voice sharpened slightly. "Ms. Wilson, I strongly advise you to attend. The estate needs to be settled, and you're named as a beneficiary. The word beneficiary felt foreign in Megan's mouth as she repeated it. People like her didn't inherit things. They worked and struggled and made do. They didn't get windfalls from forgotten relatives. What did she leave me? That will be discussed at the reading, 2 o'clock. Our office is downtown. The address meant nothing. Downtown might as well be another country, unreachable on her schedule with her resources. But curiosity flickered a dangerous spark of hope she couldn't afford. When her shift ended at 11 p.m., Megan collected Lily, who had fallen asleep on a folded jacket in the break room. They drove home carefully, the car making ominous noises despite Jack's temporary fix. The snow had stopped, but the temperature had dropped further, transforming the world into a treacherous landscape of ice and shadow. The apartment was freezing when they arrived. Megan tucked Lily into bed with extra blankets before sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the bills spread before her like an impossible puzzle. The lawyer's call replayed in her mind. A will, a beneficiary, the absurdity of it. She remembered more about Eleanor now. The stern woman at Christmas, when Megan was 9, slipping her a $20 bill when no one was looking. For books, she'd whispered, "Always invest in your mind, Sarah." The woman's hands had been calloused and strong, nothing like the soft, manicured hands of Megan's other aunts. She remembered Eleanor fixing her own car in the church parking lot, while the family watched from inside, embarrassed by her independence, her disregard for gender expectations. Her grandmother had called Eleanor strange and difficult, words adults used for women who didn't conform. The next morning, Megan made a decision that felt both reckless and necessary. She called in sick to the diner. Marcus was incredulous, then angry. "You're joking. In 5 years, you've never called out." "I'm not joking. Family emergency." His response was immediate and final. "You missed today, don't bother coming back." The line went dead. 5 years of burns and grease and aching feet. Gone. Megan stared at the phone, shocked at how quickly security could evaporate and yet also strangely liberated. She called the grocery store next, her voice steadier. "Death in the family. Need today off." Her supervisor there was unexpectedly kind. "Take all the time you need." The contrast to Marcus's reaction brought a bitter laugh. One job lost, one job kept. The mathematics of survival had not fundamentally changed. Lily emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes, immediately sensing something different in her mother's demeanor. "What's happening?" Megan explained about the great aunt, the will, the downtown appointment. Lily's eyes widened with each detail. "The witch lady, that's what Grandma always called here." Megan's hands tightened reflexively. She wasn't a witch, she was just different. Different how she lived alone. Made her own rules, didn't care what people thought. "Like you," Lily added matter-of-factly. The observation startled Megan. "I care what people think." "No, you don't. When those moms at school said we couldn't afford the field trip, you didn't care. You just worked extra and paid for it anyway." Megan blinked hard against sudden emotion. When had her daughter become so perceptive? They dressed in their best clothes. Megan in the Navy interview suit with the hem held by clear tape, Lily in her Christmas dress from the previous year, now inches too short. The car started reluctantly, the grinding noise worse than before. Jack Reynolds' garage appeared on their right as they made their way downtown. On impulse, Megan pulled into his lot. He emerged from the service bay, wiping hands on a rag recognition, lighting his features. "The car giving you trouble again?" She explained about the downtown appointment, the uncertainty about whether the car would make it. Jack listened without interruption, then offered a solution that took her by surprise. "The roads are still icy. I have a 4-wheel drive truck and a clear schedule this afternoon. Let me drive you." His kindness seemed impossible out of place in a world that had taught Megan to expect nothing. She started to decline, automatically the reflex of someone accustomed to managing alone, but Lily spoke first. "That would be amazing. Mom's car makes scary noises when she turns left." Jack's laugh was unexpected and warm. Honesty from the co-pilot. Hard to argue with that assessment. 20 minutes later, they were in his truck heading downtown. The vehicle was impeccably maintained but showing its age, a practical machine rather than a status symbol. Jack drove with the relaxed confidence of someone at home behind the wheel, explaining that he'd been a military engineer before opening the garage. Built bunkers and secure facilities in places I'm probably still not supposed to name. Got injured on my last deployment. Came back home, opened the garage. Simpler life. The law office occupied the third floor of a granite building that intimidated by design. Marble floors, leather furniture, hushed voices. The trappings of wealth that made Megan acutely aware of her taped hem and discount store shoes. Lily stayed close, unusually quiet in these surroundings. Other people filtered into the waiting room. Megan recognized some with a sinking feeling. Cousins, second cousins, people she hadn't seen since her mother's funeral 7 years ago. People who hadn't checked on them once during the hard years after. People who now viewed her with barely concealed curiosity and judgment. Well, Sarah Bennett's daughter. All grown up. The voice belonged to Michael Matthews, Eleanor's nephew. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the practiced smile of someone who worked in finance or law. His gaze traveled from Megan to Lily, then to Jack, making assumptions that colored his tone. I wasn't aware Eleanor knew you. She didn't really. Not since I was a child. Michael's smile tightened. Then this should be quick. Aunt Eleanor was quite specific about her friends and family. Very particular about who she trusted. His emphasis on family carried clear meaning. Jack, standing slightly behind Megan, shifted his position subtly. Nothing threatening, just a quiet realignment that somehow made Michael step back slightly. The body language of men who recognized each other's capacity. The lawyer, Jennifer Daniels, emerged from an inner office, professionally elegant in a charcoal suit. She called them in by name, her eyes lingering briefly on Megan with something like recognition. The conference room beyond held an oval table of polished oak surrounded by 10 leather chairs. A projection screen on one wall displayed Eleanor Matthews' name and dates, 1938-2022. Megan sat with Lily on one side and Jack on the other. Across from them, Michael settled between his sister Patricia and brother Robert. Both siblings had the same patrician features as Michael, the same air of entitled expectation. Patricia's eyes, however, held something softer when they rested on Lily, the recognition of one mother for a child not her own. Jennifer Daniels began with professional efficiency, expressing condolences before explaining that Eleanor Matthews had left explicit instructions for the distribution of her estate. There was no small talk, no warming of the audience, just the cold facts of death and inheritance. Eleanor Matthews died peacefully at her home on December 12th. She was 84 years old. She left a detailed will that I will now read in accordance with her wishes. Michael cleared his throat impatiently. How much are we talking about, Jennifer? The cabin? And what else? The lawyer's expression remained neutral. All details are in the will, Mr. Matthews. If you'll allow me to proceed. She began reading legal phrases flowing in measured cadence. Eleanor's wishes for cremation already carried out. Small bequests to 2 local charities. And then the section that brought the room to complete stillness. To my great-niece, Megan Wilson, daughter of Sarah Bennett, granddaughter of my beloved sister Rose, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all property, financial assets, and personal belongings. This includes my cabin and land at 1428 Ridgeline Road, Whispering Pines. Michael's chair scraped back abruptly. This is absurd. Eleanor was not of sound mind. She barely knew Megan. There's been a mistake, the lawyer continued as if he hadn't spoken. I have chosen Megan as my heir because she possesses qualities I value: resilience, independence, and integrity. Qualities that are increasingly rare in our family line. I have watched her from a distance for many years and am confident in this decision. The room erupted in overlapping voices. Michael's the loudest, insisting the will couldn't be valid. Patricia asking for clarification on financial details. Robert muttering about legal challenges. Through it all, Megan sat frozen, the words, entirety of my remaining estate, echoing in her mind. Lily's hand found hers under the table, a small anchor in the sudden storm. Jack remained silent beside her, a steadying presence as the Matthews family unleashed their indignation. Jennifer Daniels raised her hand for silence. The will has been properly executed and witnessed. Ms. Matthews was examined by 2 independent physicians who certified her mental competence. I understand this may be unexpected, but I assure you everything is in order. Michael stood now, his face flushed with anger. She's been living in isolation for 40 years. Paranoid. Difficult. Everyone knows this. And now you're saying she left everything to someone she hasn't seen in decades? It's clearly undue influence. Megan finally found her voice. I haven't spoken to Eleanor since I was a child. I had no influence whatsoever. Then why would she do this? Michael demanded, his voice rising. The cabin's worthless, falling apart in the middle of nowhere. What else is there? Jennifer Daniels consulted her notes. Ms. Matthews' cabin and 20 acres of land, her personal belongings, and financial assets that will be detailed in the executor documents which Ms. Wilson will receive today. How much Michael pressed. That information is confidential unless Ms. Wilson chooses to share it. All eyes turned to Megan, expectant calculating. She met their gazes directly, finding strength in the absurdity of the situation. I have no idea. I didn't even know I was in her will until yesterday. This isn't over, Michael said, gathering his coat. Our family lawyer will be contacting you. Aunt Eleanor was not in her right mind. He gestured to his siblings, who rose obediently. We're challenging this. As they filed out, Patricia paused beside Megan's chair. Her voice was low, meant only for Megan's ears. Eleanor was eccentric, not crazy, and she was watching. She always watched all of us, remember that. Before Megan could respond, Patricia was gone, following her brothers from the room. Jennifer Daniels waited until the door closed before addressing Megan again. I apologize for the tension. This happens often with unexpected inheritances. Here are the executor documents, property deed, and keys to the cabin. There's also a letter from Ms. Matthews addressed to you personally. The envelope she handed across the table was cream-colored, heavyweight paper. Eleanor Matthews' name embossed at the top, the handwriting below, precise and elegant despite the author's age. For Megan Wilson, to be delivered after my death. The keys were old-fashioned, heavy iron rather than modern brass. The kind of keys that suggested thick wooden doors in solid craftsmanship. The property deed showed 1428 Ridgeline Road, 20 acres of forest land, with a 3-bedroom cabin built in 1962. The executor documents were intimidating in their legal complexity. Jennifer Daniels continued, there are decisions to be made about the property, taxes to consider. I'd be happy to recommend some financial advisors who could help you navigate this. Megan nodded numbly, trying to process. This morning she had lost one job and owned a dying car. Now she apparently owned property, land, maybe more. The whiplash of circumstance made coherent thought difficult. Was there anything else besides the cabin? The lawyer's expression gave nothing away. I suggest you read the letter, Ms. Wilson. Eleanor was quite specific about how information should be shared. Outside the law office, the afternoon sun had emerged, beginning the slow melt of snow from sidewalks and cars. Jack waited while Megan stood on the steps, adjusting to a world that had fundamentally shifted in the space of an hour. Lily bounced beside her, excitement breaking through the solemnity of the occasion. Do we own a cabin now? Can we see it? Is it in the woods? Does it have electricity? Each question reflected the sudden expansion of possibility in a life previously defined by limitations. Megan tucked the documents carefully into her purse, the keys heavy in her coat pocket. To Jack, she said simply, I need to see this place. He nodded, understanding immediately. The cabin's about an hour north in the mountains. Roads might still be dicey. My truck can handle it if you want to go now. The drive took them out of the city through suburbs that gradually gave way to rural landscapes. As they climbed into the mountains, cell service became intermittent, then disappeared entirely. The world narrowed to winding roads bordered by snow-laden pines. Jack drove carefully, explaining the challenges of mountain terrain in winter. These roads can close completely after heavy snow. The cabin's probably been vacant since Eleanor passed. Might be cold, possibly some storm damage. Most mountain properties need regular maintenance. His practical assessment helped ground Megan, whose thoughts had been spiraling between disbelief and fragile hope since leaving the lawyer's office. The reality would likely be somewhere between Michael's dismissive worthless and Lily's romantic notion of a woodland retreat. They turned onto Ridgeline Road, a narrow track barely cleared of snow. Half a mile in the GPS announced they had arrived, though nothing was visible except dense forest. Jack slowed, searching until a small reflective marker appeared on their right, 1428 on a weathered wooden post. The driveway beyond was completely unplowed, disappearing into the trees. Jack stopped the truck, assessing. We'll have to walk in. Might be a quarter mile to the actual cabin. They trudged through knee-deep snow, Lily forging enthusiastically ahead despite the difficulty. The forest closed around them, peaceful in its winter silence. After several hundred yards, the trees thinned, revealing a clearing with a structure at its center. The cabin was larger than Megan had expected. 2 stories of weathered timber and stone, a steep roof now heavily laden with snow. It had the solid, intentional presence of a place built to last rather than to impress. Smoke-stained chimney, covered porch wrapping around two sides. Windows shuttered against the elements. It looked substantial. Neither the worthless ruin Michael had implied nor an idyllic retreat. Something built with purpose, maintained adequately, if not lovingly. A shelter, a stronghold. The iron key turned smoothly in the front door lock, suggesting regular oiling despite the cabin's apparent vacancy. The door itself was surprisingly heavy solid oak, reinforced with iron bands, more fortress than vacation home. It opened with a deep groan of wood against wood. The interior was dark, the shuttered windows admitting only thin blades of light through their seams. The air smelled of wood smoke, dust, and something else, a faint metallic tang that Megan couldn't immediately identify. Jack found a light switch beside the door, but nothing happened when he flipped it. "Power's probably off," he said. Most cabin owners shut down utilities when they're away for extended periods, especially in winter. Lily had already moved deeper into the space, her silhouette visible against a window as she pushed open the shutters. Daylight flooded in, revealing the great room that comprised most of the first floor. Stone fireplace dominating one wall. Practical furniture arranged for conversation rather than show. Bookshelves packed tightly with volumes whose spines showed the varied colors of decades. "It looks like she just stepped out," Lily whispered, touching a coffee mug still sitting on a side table. Megan moved through the space, slowly trying to reconcile this solid reality with her hazy childhood memories of the aunt who'd become a family ghost. The cabin was neither luxurious nor neglected. It was functional, intentional, like Eleanor herself had been. The kitchen held cast iron cookware and sturdy dishes. The pantry contained canned goods with distant expiration dates. A desk in the corner held neatly stacked papers and a rotary telephone that belonged in a museum. Jack examined the utilities with professional interest, checking the circuit panel, the water lines, the propane tank visible through a side window. "Winter shut down, but done properly. Everything's here just dormant. I can probably get the generator running if you want light and heat while we're here." While he worked outside, Megan climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. 3 bedrooms branched from a central hallway. The master at the end, Spartan and neat, containing a double bed with a hand-stitched quilt, a dresser, and a bedside table holding a single book. The other rooms were similarly appointed, though with fewer personal touches. Guest rooms rarely used. The walls throughout held framed photographs. Eleanor through the decades. A young woman in 1950s dress standing proudly beside a new car. Middle-aged hiking in woods that might have been these very ones. Older seated at the desk downstairs surrounded by papers. Always alone in the images, as if the photographer were an intrusion temporarily tolerated rather than welcomed. Except for one photo prominently placed in the upstairs hallway. Eleanor and another woman so similar they could only be sisters, arms linked, laughing at something outside the frame. Megan recognized her grandmother Rose, decades younger than she'd ever known her. The inscription beneath Rose and Eleanor, 1962. The year the cabin was built. Megan heard the generator cough to life outside, followed by the sudden illumination of the hallway light. Downstairs, Lily exclaimed in triumph as the refrigerator hummed into operation. The cabin was awakening from its dormancy, responding to human presence after weeks of abandonment. In the master bedroom, Megan sat carefully on the edge of the bed and opened Eleanor's letter. The paper was the same heavy stock as the envelope, the handwriting firm and decisive despite the slight tremor visible in the longer strokes. "My dear Megan, if you're reading this, I have passed from this world, and you have inherited what I've built over a lifetime. I've watched you from a distance since you were born. I saw myself in you even as a child. The determination, the self-reliance, the quiet strength that our family often mistakes for stubbornness. After your grandmother Rose died, I withdrew from family gatherings, finding them increasingly shallow and difficult. But I never stopped watching over her descendants. I followed your mother Sarah's life and later yours. I know about your marriage, your divorce, your struggles as a single mother. I admire the dignity with which you've faced adversity. I built this cabin after Rose died in 1962, seeking solitude and simplicity. What began as a retreat became a fortress as my investments prospered and my distrust of others grew. The cabin holds more than memories, Megan. Much more. Look for the mountain that doesn't match. Trust only those who help without expecting return. Remember that wealth concealed preserves itself, but wealth revealed attracts predators. You'll understand soon enough. The combination is Rose's birthday, month, day, year. With faith in your judgment, Eleanor Matthews Megan read the letter twice, trying to extract meaning from its cryptic conclusion. The mountain that doesn't match. Wealth concealed, a combination without a lock to use it on. Eleanor's communication was as enigmatic as family stories suggested she had been in life. Downstairs, the heating system had begun to function, pushing warmth through vents in the floor. Jack had managed to activate not just the generator, but the propane furnace as well. The main room already felt more welcoming as shadows retreated from the corners. Lily stood before a large landscape painting above the fireplace, her head tilted in concentration. This mountain looks weird. Mom, it doesn't match the others. The painting showed a panoramic view of the surrounding mountain range, rendered with technical accuracy rather than artistic flourish. But Lily was right. One peak in the foreground had a distinctive shape that seemed geologically improbable compared to its neighbors. More importantly, looking through the cabin's west-facing window, Megan could see the actual mountains, and the discrepancy was obvious. The artist had intentionally altered one peak. Look for the mountain that doesn't match. Megan approached the painting, slowly examining it with new attention. The frame was heavier than necessary, attached to the wall with bolts rather than hooks. The canvas itself seemed unusually rigid behind the painted surface. This isn't just a painting, she murmured. It's covering something. Jack joined them, bringing his technical perspective. The frame's anchored to the wall studs. See how it doesn't hang quite flush? There could be a recess behind it. Working together, they located hidden latches at the corners of the frame. When all four were released simultaneously, the entire painting swung outward like a door, revealing a steel panel set into the wall. At its center was a combination dial, not a modern electronic keypad, but an old-fashioned mechanical lock, similar to those found on bank vaults. Rose's birthday, Megan whispered, recalling the letter. Month, day, year. She dialed the numbers carefully. 04/12/1940. The lock resisted, then yielded with a solid click that suggested precision engineering. The steel panel swung inward, exposing a wall safe large enough to hold several books. Inside lay a stack of folders, a leather-bound journal, and a USB drive that looked incongruously modern among the analog contents. Megan removed the items, carefully aware that she was handling the deliberately preserved secrets of a woman who had lived apart from family, yet apparently watched them all. The top folder contained property documents, surveys of the 20 acres permits for construction that went well beyond the visible cabin technical drawings that suggested modifications and additions over decades. Jack studied the drawings with professional interest. These are military-grade, reinforced construction, alternative power systems. Your aunt wasn't just building a cabin, she was creating a secure facility. The second folder held financial records, account statements from multiple banks, investment portfolios, records of transactions spanning 40 years of careful wealth accumulation. Megan's breath caught as she registered the figures. Hundreds of thousands, millions, a fortune hidden in plain sight by a woman the family had dismissed as eccentric and difficult. Eleanor was rich, Lily said, peering at the statements over Megan's shoulder. Really rich. Like movie rich. The journal provided context the financial records couldn't. Eleanor's private thoughts recorded in the same precise handwriting as the letter. Her early career in investment banking, unusual for women in the 1960s. Her skill at identifying undervalued companies. Her growing disillusionment with family who sought her financial advice but ignored her personal choices. And then from 1962 onward, entries about Rose. The devastating car accident that claimed her sister's life. The grief that drove Eleanor to build the cabin as a memorial and retreat. The gradual transition from mourning to purpose as she dedicated herself to growing wealth that would someday benefit Rose's descendants, but only those who proved worthy of the legacy. I've watched Sarah's daughter from afar. Megan shows promise, determined, resourceful. She values education despite financial constraints. She protects her child with dignity rather than complaint. Rose would have approved. We'll continue to observe. The entry was dated just 3 years earlier. Eleanor had been watching, evaluating, even as Megan struggled through the worst years of her life. The knowledge was both comforting and unsettling. The final folder contained something unexpected. Surveillance photographs. Eleanor's cabin from various angles. the property perimeter, and most surprisingly, Megan herself, leaving the diner, picking Lily up from school, standing in line at the grocery store where she worked. The images weren't threatening or invasive. They documented ordinary moments from respectful distances. Evidence of Eleanor's claim that she had watched from afar. The last items in the safe were a sealed envelope marked contingency in a small leather pouch. The envelope contained emergency contact information for someone named James Cooper, with a local phone number in the notation. Knows everything, trust fully. The pouch held a single key smaller than those to the cabin, with no indication of what it might unlock. As Megan processed these discoveries, a noise outside broke the silence, the distinctive crunch of tires on snow. Jack moved quickly to the window, his posture changing subtly from relaxed to alert. Someone's coming up the drive. Black SUV, moving slowly. Megan's mind flashed to Michael's anger at the will reading his declaration that this isn't over. She gathered the documents, quickly returning them to the safe, except for Eleanor's letter and journal. Lily helped close this painting door, ensuring the latches clicked back into place. The vehicle outside stopped just short of the cabin. Two car doors opened and closed. Male voices, footsteps on the porch steps. Then a firm knock at the door. Jack positioned himself between the door and Megan, his stance casual but prepared. I'll see who it is. He opened the door to reveal Michael Matthews standing on the porch, accompanied by a younger man in a parka who carried a leather portfolio. Michael's surprise at finding Jack answering was quickly masked by a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ah, the chauffeur. Is my cousin's daughter here? The dismissive tone made Jack's shoulders tighten slightly, but his voice remained even. Megan's inside, and you are Michael brushed past without answering, entering as if the cabin were already his property. The younger man followed, introducing himself as Thomas Reed from Matthews Financial Advisors. Michael surveyed the main room with calculated disinterest, though his eyes lingered on family photographs and potential valuables. So you've seen it now, he said to Megan. Rustic little place, isn't it? Probably needs $20,000 in repairs before it's even habitable. Eleanor let it go in her last years. Each statement was a deliberate devaluation, an attempt to diminish what Megan had inherited. She recognized the tactic from negotiations with her ex-husband during the divorce. Established low expectations to facilitate taking advantage. Actually, it's in excellent condition, Jack countered before Megan could respond. Solid construction. Good systems. Someone maintained this place meticulously. Michael's gaze sharpened as he reassessed Jack, recognizing a more knowledgeable adversary than initially assumed. And you are, what exactly, handyman friend? The glance toward Megan carried insinuation. Jack Reynolds. I own Reynolds Automotive in town. I've been helping Ms. Wilson with transportation today. The simple introduction, devoid of defensiveness, neutralized Michael's attempt to create discomfort. Megan stepped forward, finding strength in the absurdity of this man invading property that was legally hers. Why are you here, Michael? He smiled, all business now. I thought we should discuss a reasonable resolution to this situation. Thomas has prepared some options. The cabin has sentimental value to our branch of the family. We'd be willing to buy it from you, save you the headache of mountain property maintenance, taxes, winterization. You'd have cash instead of a responsibility. Thomas opened his portfolio, presenting papers with professional efficiency. We're prepared to offer $80,000. Immediate payment, no real estate commissions, simple and clean. The lowball figure confirmed Megan's suspicions. Michael knew nothing about Eleanor's hidden wealth. He valued only the cabin and land, and even then was deliberately undervaluing it. His confidence suggested he expected her desperation to drive acceptance of any offer. Before she could respond, headlights swept across the front windows. Another vehicle approaching. Jack returned to his lookout position, then reported older model pickup. One occupant. Male, looks to be in his 70s. The new arrival parked beside Michael's SUV. Through the window, Megan watched an elderly man emerge, slowly leaning on a walking stick as he navigated the snowy path to the porch. His knock was gentler than Michael's had been, almost apologetic. Jack opened the door again. The man outside wore a weathered barn coat and a wool cap pulled low over white hair. His face was deeply lined, his eyes sharp despite their age. When he spoke, his voice carried the distinctive cadence of someone who had lived his entire life in these mountains. Name's James Cooper. I was Eleanor's friend. Heard there were vesicles up here. Came to see who's about. The name registered immediately from the safe's emergency contact. Knows everything. Trust fully. Megan stepped forward, introducing herself. The old man's eyes brightened with recognition. You're Rose's granddaughter. Eleanor showed me your picture. Said you'd come someday. His gaze shifted to Michael and Thomas, narrowing slightly. And the Matthews contingent right on schedule. Michael's professional demeanor faltered momentarily. You knew my Aunt James removed his hat, revealing more fully the face of someone who had spent decades outdoors. Knew Eleanor for 40 years. Helped her build this place. Kept an eye on it when she couldn't be here. His tone suggested a history far deeper than mere property maintenance. The dynamics in the room shifted perceptibly. James represented a connection to Eleanor that Michael couldn't claim a witness to intentions Michael hoped to circumvent. The older man moved to the fireplace with the comfort of long familiarity, examining the painting with a knowing glance toward Megan before settling into what was clearly his accustomed chair. $80,000 for this property is theft, not purchase, he stated flatly. Eleanor put 4 times that into the foundation work alone. Michael's expression hardened. The property hasn't been properly assessed. We're making a good faith offer based on comparable sales in the area. James laughed, a dry sound without humor. There are no comparable sales, nothing comparable to what Eleanor built here. The statement hung in the air, laden with meaning, only partially apparent to Megan. James knew about more than just the cabin's visible features. He knew what Eleanor had hidden, what she had created in her mountain sanctuary. A tension headache was forming behind Megan's eyes. The day had delivered too many revelations, too many shifts in reality. She was standing in a cabin she now owned, apparently worth far more than she'd imagined, surrounded by people with agendas she was just beginning to understand. And somewhere beneath the surface lay secrets Eleanor had preserved for decades, secrets now entrusted to her. The snow outside had begun again, falling more heavily as daylight faded. James glanced toward the windows, then addressed Megan directly. Storm's picking up. Mountain weather's unpredictable this time of year. If you folks aren't equipped to stay overnight, you should head down before the roads get worse. The warning was practical, but something in his tone suggested it was directed primarily at Michael and Thomas. The message was clear: they didn't belong here as conditions worsened. Michael recognized the dismissal and resisted. We're not finished discussing the property offer. Megan needs time to consider the proposal properly. She's considering nothing tonight, James replied firmly. Mountains made the decision for all of us. Look outside. The snow was now falling in thick swirling sheets, visibility reduced to mere yards. Jack confirmed the deteriorating conditions. The old man's right, we need to leave now if we're going to make it down safely. My truck can handle it, but I wouldn't recommend your SUV on these roads much longer. Michael reluctantly gathered his papers, handing a business card to Megan. Call me when you're ready to discuss this rationally. Don't let sentimentality cloud your judgment about a property you can't possibly maintain. As he and Thomas prepared to leave, James made a suggestion that carried the weight of local wisdom. Follow the plow truck's tracks all the way down. Don't try any shortcuts. People get lost in these conditions, even on roads they think they know. When their vehicles had disappeared into the swirling white, James turned to Megan with an expression that transformed his weathered features. The guardedness vanished, replaced by something like relief. Eleanor said you'd come, said you were the one who'd understand what she built here, what she was protecting. Jack checked the windows again, his practical nature asserting itself. We should head down too, before it gets worse. James shook his head slowly. Too late for that. Storm's moving faster than expected. Road down will be impassable within the hour. He gestured toward the kitchen. Eleanor kept emergency supplies. Generator has enough fuel for 3 days. You're safer here than trying to descend. The pronouncement should have alarmed Megan, stranded in an unfamiliar cabin with a stranger, however apparently connected to her aunt. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of rightness, as if the mountain itself had conspired to keep her here to force a deeper understanding of what she had inherited. Lily had been exploring the bookshelves, pulling volumes that caught her interest. Now she looked up, excitement rather than worry on her face. We get to stay overnight in our cabin. Our cabin, the possessive pronoun crystallized what documents and legal proceedings couldn't fully convey. This place with its secrets and solidity now belonged to them. Not just legally, but in the deeper sense of inheritance, a legacy passed from one generation to another with purpose and intention. James moved toward the kitchen with the confidence of long familiarity. Let me show you where everything is. Eleanor organized emergency supplies better than most survivalists. Said preparation was the difference between panic and peace. As he inventoried cabinets and explained systems, a new noise rose above the wind, a metallic rattling from outside followed by the scrape of something heavy against the porch. Jack tensed, moving toward the door, but James raised a hand in reassurance. That's just the security shutters deploying. Automatic system when temperature drops and wind hits certain speeds. Eleanor engineered it herself. Sure enough, metal shutters were sliding into place over the windows, battening the cabin against the worsening storm. Jack examined the mechanism with professional appreciation. Military-grade protection in a civilian setting. Your aunt wasn't just wealthy, she was serious about security. James nodded, his expression suggesting there was much more to explain. Eleanor had her reasons. After we get settled for the night, I'll tell you what she couldn't write in a letter. What she built beneath our feet. The phrase hung in the air as Megan processed its implications. Beneath our feet, the cabin's unexpected weight, the technical drawings showing more than was visible, Eleanor's cryptic references to wealth concealed. As if responding to her thoughts, the floor beneath the great room carpet vibrated slightly as the storm intensified outside. Not the movement of a structure straining against elements, but the subtle hum of machinery responding to program parameters. Lily felt it too, looking down in surprise. What's under the floor? James Cooper's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. Everything, child. Everything Eleanor wanted to protect from a world she didn't trust. He turned to Megan, his expression becoming serious. Now we wait out the storm, and then I show you what your aunt really left you. As darkness fell completely outside, the cabin's lights glowed steadily, powered by systems designed to function independently of the world beyond. Megan stood at the kitchen window, watching snow obliterate all evidence of the outside world, creating a temporary universe consisting only of this structure and its occupants. Whatever Eleanor had hidden here, the mountain was ensuring Megan would discover it on terms set by nature itself. The timing seemed deliberate, orchestrated by forces larger than human intention. A forced pause in which to contemplate the transition from desperate survival to unknown possibility. Somewhere beneath her feet lay answers to questions she hadn't yet formulated, a legacy more complex than property and possessions. In the morning after the storm passed, she would begin to understand what Eleanor had truly built here in the mountains, what she had preserved, and why she had chosen Megan, watching from afar, to inherit not just assets but responsibility. For tonight, the simple security of shelter against the storm was enough. Tomorrow would reveal what lay beneath. Dawn crept through gaps in the metal shutters, painting thin gold lines across the cabin floor. Megan woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was, until her eyes focused on the unfamiliar ceiling beams above. Eleanor's bedroom. Eleanor's bed. Now hers, according to documents that still felt unreal despite their legal weight. The storm had raged through the night wind, howling against reinforced walls that barely acknowledged its fury. The cabin's heating system had maintained a steady warmth that Megan hadn't experienced in her apartment for years, creating the novel sensation of waking without the immediate need to seek additional waiters. From the kitchen below came the quiet sounds of movement, metal against metal, water running briefly. Jack had insisted on taking the couch while James Cooper had disappeared to what he called his usual spot, in a small room off the mudroom that Megan hadn't noticed during their initial exploration. Lily had claimed one of the upstairs bedrooms with immediate proprietary enthusiasm, spreading her few belongings across the handmade quilt as if she'd lived there forever. Megan moved to the window, manually retracting the security shutter to reveal a transformed world. The storm had left nearly 2 feet of fresh snow, blanketing the clearing with drifts piled substantially higher against the cabin's northern exposure. The driveway had vanished completely beneath the pristine white expanse. They were effectively snowbound until significant melt occurred or equipment arrived to clear a path. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, running fingers through her hair in lieu of a proper brush. The practical concerns of daily life reasserted themselves despite the extraordinary circumstances. No toothbrush, no change of clothes, no way to contact her grocery store supervisor about missing another shift. The inheritance might change their future, but the present remained a complex equation of obligations and consequences. The main room below had transformed overnight from mysterious space to functional habitat. Jack had built a fire in the massive stone fireplace, adding both warmth and psychological comfort to the still unfamiliar surroundings. James moved in the kitchen with the ease of familiarity, already producing coffee from well-stocked cabinets. Slept well in Eleanor's room. The old man's question carried no judgment, just simple curiosity. It'll take time before it feels like yours. Took her years to settle in properly. Lily emerged from her room with the boundless energy of childhood, already cataloging discoveries from her exploration. The dresser has secret compartments built into the back of the drawers, and there's a trap door in my closet ceiling that might go to an attic. James nodded unsurprised. Eleanor believed in contingencies, always multiple ways in and out, multiple places to store things that mattered. Jack brought mugs of coffee to the small kitchen table, his movements revealing the stiffness in his right side, the old injury he'd briefly mentioned. Despite obvious discomfort, he'd already checked the generator and heating system, his practical nature finding purpose in mechanical assessment. The snows drifted 5 feet high against the north wall. Road down the mountain won't be passable without proper equipment. I've got a plow attachment for my truck, but it's at the garage. We're here for at least today, possibly tomorrow. James seemed unbothered by this prospect. Eleanor planned for isolation. Pantries stocked with enough to feed 10 people for a month. Freezers full too. He paused, studying Megan with the intensity of someone making a crucial assessment. Question is, are you ready to see what's really here? The morning sunlight cast his weathered face in sharp relief, revealing a man who had carried significant knowledge alone for years, awaiting the moment he could transfer it to its rightful inheritor. Megan recognized that this was not merely an offer of information, but a transition of responsibility. Show me everything. After breakfast, James led them to the stone fireplace that dominated the cabin's north wall. The massive structure appeared purely decorative when inactive, a showcase of traditional craftsmanship. Now, with flames dancing within its maw, it projected an aura of primordial protection against the winter wilderness beyond. The old man knelt with surprising agility at the hearth, reaching into the shadows beneath the firebox. His fingers located something hidden, a mechanism that clicked softly when manipulated. The stone hearth shifted slightly, revealing a seam that had been invisible moments before. Fireplace is real, but it's also a doorway. Eleanor designed it after studying medieval castle defenses, hidden in plain sight but solid as a bank vault. He pressed a specific sequence of stones in the surround. The newly revealed seam widened as a section of the hearth slid smoothly sideways, exposing stone steps that descended into darkness beneath the cabin. Cool air wafted upward, carrying the scent of concrete metal and something else, the distinctive atmosphere of a space sealed against external elements. James reached inside, activating a switch that illuminated the stairwell with recessed lighting. Concrete steps led downward, the walls transitioning from natural stone to reinforced construction as they descended. Bunker beneath the cabin was Eleanor's real project. Cabin's just the entrance. What you saw yesterday, the safe, the documents, that was just the introduction. This is what she actually built. They descended in single file, James leading with the confidence of familiarity, Megan following with Jack and Lily behind. The stairwell extended approximately 15 feet down before opening into a corridor with polished concrete floors and walls of what appeared to be reinforced material. Recessed lighting activated automatically as they moved forward, revealing a complex that extended well beyond the cabin's footprint above. Eleanor started construction in 1962 after Rose died. Initially just a shelter somewhere to retreat when the world felt hostile. Over the decades, it evolved into something more comprehensive, something designed to preserve what she valued most. The corridor branched in 3 directions, each branch labeled in Eleanor's precise handwriting: storage, living quarters, and vault. James led them toward the last option, stopping before a heavy metal door that resembled a bank vault entrance in both appearance and apparent security. Unlike the fireplace, mechanism above this barrier announced its purpose unambiguously: to protect whatever lay beyond from unauthorized access. This requires both mechanical and electronic authentication. Eleanor updated the security every few years, keeping pace with technology while maintaining redundant systems. The combination from her letter opens this, but there's also a biometric component. He placed his hand on a scanner beside the vault door, then stepped back. Your turn. It's been programmed to recognize the Matthews bloodline. Eleanor extracted DNA from items you'd handled. A cup from a diner where you work, strands of hair. Ethically questionable, perhaps, but she was determined to create a system only you could access. The revelation was unsettling. Evidence of Eleanor's surveillance extending beyond mere observation to biological sampling. Yet it also confirmed the deliberate nature of her choice. This inheritance wasn't random or sentimental. It was methodically planned over years, possibly decades. Megan placed her hand on the scanner with hesitation. The surface was cool to the touch, briefly illuminating with blue light that traced the pattern of her palm and fingerprints. A soft tone indicated acceptance, followed by the mechanical sound of internal locks disengaging. The door's weight was substantial, but it swung open with surprisingly little resistance, revealing what lay beyond. The vault was approximately 30 feet square, with walls of reinforced concrete and a ceiling of similar construction. But it was the contents that commanded immediate attention. Row upon row of metal shelving, each supporting neatly arranged assets that represented extraordinary wealth in physical form. Gold bars stacked in precise rows, each marked with weight and purity stamps. Cases containing coins, some modern bullion, others clearly historical and numismatic in nature. Several shelving units held organized files and ledgers, while a modern computer workstation sat in one corner, incongruous among the physical treasure. Most striking was the center of the room, where a custom-designed display case contained what appeared to be jewelry bar and gemstones arranged by type and size. Diamonds, emeralds, rubies, and others. Megan couldn't immediately identify each, in settings that suggested both investment value and aesthetic appreciation. Lily's voice broke the stunned silence. We're rich, like dragon treasure rich. James moved to a control panel on the wall, activating additional lighting that revealed the vault's full contents in clinical detail. Eleanor converted much of her wealth to physical assets during the financial crises of the 70s and 80s. Didn't trust banks or investment firms after certain experiences. Preferred tangible assets she could see and touch. Each item is cataloged in those ledgers with current market value updated quarterly. Jack examined the nearest shelf with the professional assessment of someone who understood physical security. This setup, it's beyond high-end, military grade or better, temperature control, humidity regulation, redundant power systems. He gestured toward barely visible vents near the ceiling. Even air filtration. This isn't just storage, it's preservation infrastructure. James nodded in confirmation. Eleanor consulted with specialists in archival preservation, museum security, even government contractors. Always used different experts for different systems, so no single person understood the full scope. Paid cash used various names. Paranoid perhaps, but effective. Megan approached the central display, drawn to a particular item. A diamond necklace in an Art Deco setting prominently featured among the jewelry collection. James noticed her attention. That belonged to Rose, the only piece Eleanor kept from their mother's collection. Everything else she converted to more practical assets. But that she preserved for sentimental reasons. Said it should return to Rose's bloodline eventually. The revelation added emotional weight to a discovery already overwhelming in its materiality. This wasn't merely wealth, it was a deliberate legacy constructed around a core of family connection, despite Eleanor's apparent isolation. Megan's fingers traced the edge of the display case without touching the glass. How much is all this worth? James moved to the computer workstation, activating it with practiced ease. The system powered up immediately, requiring another biometric scan before displaying its contents. Eleanor maintained detailed inventory with current market valuations. As of her last update 3 months ago, approximately $153 million, not including the real estate and various financial accounts. The figure seemed abstract, disconnected from reality, as Megan had experienced it. Just yesterday morning, she'd been calculating whether she could afford to repair her car or pay the electric bill. The cognitive dissonance between that existence and the wealth now surrounding her created a sense of unreality, as if she'd stepped into someone else's life. This is impossible. Why me? Why not her actual friends or people she was close to? James's weathered face softened slightly. Eleanor believed wealth should serve purpose, not ego. She watched how you managed with little, how you prioritized your daughter's needs above material comfort, how you maintained dignity despite circumstances. She saw what she called stewardship potential in you, the ability to use resources without being corrupted by them. The old man gestured toward the ledgers. She documented everything, not just acquisitions and values, but her philosophy of wealth, her intentions for what she built. There's a letter in the main ledger specifically addressing your question. I suggest you read it before making any decisions. Jack had been examining the vault's security features with professional interest, but now turned toward the practical implications. This changes everything about your situation, but it also creates immediate challenges. Wealth of this magnitude can't simply be deposited in a checking account. There are tax implications, security concerns, legal complexities. His assessment was accurate but understated. The treasure surrounding them represented both solution and problem, the answer to Megan's financial struggles, but the beginning of entirely new complications. Most immediately, it placed her in potential conflict with family members who clearly believed Eleanor's estate consisted merely of a rustic cabin. If Michael knew about this, the thought remained incomplete, but its implications hung in the air. The aggressive cousin who had attempted to pressure her into selling the cabin would undoubtedly pursue this wealth with considerably more determination. James seemed to read her thoughts. Eleanor anticipated various scenarios after her passing. There's a comprehensive security plan in place, legal frameworks established through trustworthy channels, contingencies for different challenges. She didn't just accumulate wealth, she created infrastructure to protect it. He led them from the vault to the corridor's other branches, revealing additional aspects of Eleanor's underground complex. The living quarters section contained a fully functional apartment, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen facilities, even a small library and entertainment area. Like the vault, it featured sophisticated air handling, water purification, and independent power systems. She could live down here for months if necessary. During certain periods when she felt particularly vulnerable. The systems are designed to function independently from the cabin above, with multiple redundancies. The storage section proved equally impressive. A large space stocked with preserved food, medical supplies, clothing, and equipment, ranging from basic tools to sophisticated communications gear. One wall held weapons, hunting rifles, shotguns, and handguns, each in locked cases with ammunition stored separately. Eleanor believed in preparation without paranoia. Everything here serves practical purpose, sustenance, security, communication. Not doomsday hoarding, but thoughtful contingency planning. Jack examined the communications equipment with particular interest. Some of this is military grade. Secure channels, independent power sources, satellite capabilities. Your aunt wasn't just wealthy, she had connections in significant places. James acknowledged this with a slight nod. Eleanor's investment career involved government contracts occasionally. She made contacts, maintained relationships with people who appreciated discretion and competence. When she needed specialized equipment or expertise, she knew where to find it without attracting attention. As they returned to the main corridor, Lily noticed something the adults had overlooked. A smaller passage branching from the primary route, its entrance less prominent than the others. "What's down there?" James hesitated briefly before answering. Eleanor's personal project room, where she monitored family members' planned security upgrades, conducted research. The most private space in the complex. He glanced at Megan questioningly. "It's your decision whether to explore it now." The choice felt symbolic, a step beyond simply discovering Eleanor's wealth to understanding her motivations and methods. Megan nodded and James led them down the narrow passage to a door different from the others, wood rather than metal, with a simple mechanical lock that required a physical key. This would be the small key from the leather pouch in the wall safe, Megan realized, retrieving it from her pocket. It turned smoothly in the lock, granting access to Eleanor's inner sanctum. The room beyond was smaller than the vault, but similar in its meticulous organization. One wall held surveillance monitors, currently inactive, but clearly designed to observe the property's perimeter. Another featured a complex timeline constructed of photographs, documents, and handwritten notes, a visual representation of the Matthews family history spanning decades with particular focus on Rose's descendants. Megan found herself on this timeline, her life documented through photographs that began in childhood and continued to recent months, school records, employment history, medical documents, court filings from her divorce. Even Lily appeared extensively, her development tracked from birth through current school activities. The comprehensive nature of this surveillance was simultaneously touching and disturbing, evidence of Eleanor's deep interest, but also her willingness to invade privacy in service of her objectives. The timeline revealed not just observation, but intervention at critical junctures. Anonymous scholarships that had mysteriously materialized when Megan needed educational funding, a rental apartment that became available precisely when she needed housing, after the divorce job opportunities that appeared at crucial moments. She was pulling strings all along, creating safety nets I never knew existed. James nodded solemnly. Eleanor believed in strategic intervention rather than direct support. Said handouts created dependency, but opportunities fostered growth. She wanted to see what you do with minimal assistance before entrusting you with everything. The most recent addition to the timeline was dated just weeks before Eleanor's death, a notation regarding Michael's financial troubles and suspected surveillance of the cabin. The note indicated Eleanor had documented his activities as potential contestation evidence, should he challenge her will. She knew he'd fight the inheritance, was already preparing countermeasures. On the room's third wall hung framed photographs of Eleanor with various individuals, predominantly older men in military or government attire, though none in formal uniform. The images spanned decades, showing Eleanor's progression from young professional to elderly matriarch, always in context suggesting serious discussion rather than social engagement. James indicated this collection with a sweep of his hand. Eleanor's network, former military intelligence community security specialists, not friends exactly, more like mutual respect societies. People who appreciated her discretion and competence with capital. People who might be called upon if circumstances warranted intervention. The final wall held bookshelves filled with volumes on diverse subjects: financial theory, security systems, surveillance methodology, property law, and perhaps most tellingly, psychological profiles of family members, including Michael, Patricia, and Robert. Eleanor had studied her relatives as methodically as she'd studied investment strategies, creating detailed assessments of their motivations, vulnerabilities, and potential threat levels. Megan found her own file substantially thicker than the others. Inside were not just observations, but projections. Scenarios Eleanor had imagined regarding how Megan might handle sudden wealth, what challenges she might face, what support she might need. The most recent entries showed increasing confidence in Eleanor's assessment of her chosen heir, including contingency plans for the transition period following her death. Jack examined the surveillance system with professional interest. This isn't just passive recording, it's a comprehensive security perimeter with motion detection, heat signatures, even rudimentary facial recognition. Your aunt was serious about knowing who approached her property and why. James moved to the system's control panel, activating it with practiced ease. The monitors illuminated, showing various angles of the snow-covered property above. Most views revealed only pristine white landscape, but one captured movement, a vehicle slowly navigating the unplowed road toward the cabin. Black SUV, same as yesterday. Michael's persistence was unsurprising but concerning. His return so soon after the previous visit, despite challenging road conditions, suggested determination beyond casual interest in the property. If he was willing to risk difficult mountain driving in winter conditions, his motivation went beyond the simple real estate acquisition he'd proposed. James studied the approaching vehicle with narrowed eyes. He's moving cautiously. Likely has chains or snow tires. Still, he's taking significant risk on these roads. Must believe there's something worth the effort. The surveillance cameras tracked the SUV's progress until it parked in the same position as the previous day. Two figures emerged. Michael, again accompanied not by his financial advisor, but by a different man, older and more physically imposing, carrying what appeared to be specialized equipment. That's Frank Donovan, local locksmith with questionable ethics. Has a reputation for helping landlords with emergency access situations that aren't exactly emergencies. The implication was clear. Michael had returned with someone capable of bypassing locks, potentially gaining unauthorized access to the cabin. His actions had escalated from persuasion to attempted intrusion, or confirming Eleanor's assessment of him as a significant threat to her legacy. Jack's posture shifted subtly, his military background evident in the way he analyzed the developing situation. They're expecting an empty cabin, Don't know we're here. That gives us tactical advantage. Megan felt a surge of protective instinct that surprised her with its intensity. 24 hours earlier, she'd been a struggling single mother with minimal possessions worth protecting. Now she found herself preparing to defend a legacy that could transform her daughter's future against relatives willing to subvert legal processes to claim it. The monitors showed Michael and the locksmith approaching the cabin's front entrance, their movements suggesting confidence rather than caution. They expected to find an unoccupied structure vulnerable to exploration and assessment without witnesses. James reached beneath the control panel, retrieving what appeared to be a remote device with minimal controls. Eleanor installed certain defensive measures, non-lethal but effective deterrents for unwanted visitors. He offered the device to Megan. Your property now, your decision how to respond. The transition of authority was explicit. No longer was James the caretaker acting on Eleanor's behalf, but now the advisor to Eleanor's chosen successor. The responsibility for protecting the legacy had officially transferred to Megan, beginning with this first test of her resolve. She studied the device, its simple interface suggesting basic functionality, despite the sophisticated systems it likely controlled. Show me what it does before they reach the door. James indicated specific buttons on the remote. Perimeter warning system. Broadcast voice message about private property and surveillance. Security shutters can be activated remotely rather than just by weather conditions. External lights, powerful enough to temporarily affect night vision. And this one, he pointed to a red button protected by a safety cover, initiates full lockdown. All entrances, sealed communications to predetermined security contacts activated. Use only in genuine emergency. On the monitors, Michael and the locksmith had reached the front porch, their conversation inaudible, but their body language suggesting a professional assessment of the entry points. The locksmith knelt at the door, examining the mechanism with tools already in hand. Megan pressed the button, activating the perimeter warning. On screen, both men startled visibly as a recorded message played from concealed speakers. This property is under 24-hour surveillance. All activities are being recorded. Please identify yourself using the intercom or vacate the premises immediately. The security system's voice was feminine but authoritative, perhaps Eleanor's own, though modulated to disguise its source. Michael recovered quickly, scanning the porch for visible cameras or speakers. His expression suggested irritation rather than embarrassment at being detected. Lily watched the monitors with fascination. He doesn't look scared, just angry that he got caught. Jack moved closer to the screens, analyzing the situation with tactical precision. He's weighing options, knows he's recorded doing something questionable, deciding whether to bluff it out or retreat. On screen, Michael appeared to make his decision, approaching what must be the intercom panel beside the door. His mouth moved as he delivered some message, though the surveillance system didn't transmit audio from that source to their location below. James pressed another control, activating audio reception. Michael's voice emerged from speakers in the monitoring room, his tone carefully modulated to project casual authority, despite being caught in a potentially compromising situation. Hello, I'm Michael Matthews, nephew of the property owner. Just checking on the cabin after the storm. Wanted to make sure everything was secure. The deliberate misrepresentation of his relationship to the property confirmed his intentions. No longer was he acknowledging Megan's inheritance. He was positioning himself as the legitimate representative of Eleanor's interests, using the storm as pretext for his intrusion attempt. Megan considered her response options. Direct confrontation would reveal their presence, but might deter further attempts. Allowing him to continue his deception might provide valuable evidence of his intentions. The decision reflected more than immediate tactics. It would establish the tone for all future interactions regarding Eleanor's legacy. Jack offered tactical perspective. He doesn't know we're here or what we've discovered. That's significant advantage worth preserving. Let him think he's dealing with automated security rather than witnesses. James nodded agreement. Eleanor always said information asymmetry was more valuable than confrontation. The less Michael knows about your awareness, the more freely he'll act on his true intentions. Megan pressed the control that would broadcast her response through the exterior speakers. The cabin security system has been activated following yesterday's property inspection. All visitors must be pre-approved through legal representatives. Please contact Daniels and Associates to schedule authorized access. On screen, Michael's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. He hadn't expected an automated response that specifically referenced his previous visit, suggesting more sophisticated monitoring than typical vacation property security. The locksmith beside him looked increasingly uncomfortable, clearly recognizing potential legal complications in what he'd been told was a routine access situation. After visible hesitation, Michael tried again, his tone more authoritative. There seems to be some misunderstanding. I'm a family member checking on the property after severe weather. This is a welfare check, not a visitation requiring legal approval. His persistence, despite clear warning, reflected Eleanor's documented assessment of his character. Someone who viewed rules as navigable obstacles rather than binding constraints, who believed sufficient confidence could override established boundaries. The traits that had perhaps served him in business environments made him particularly dangerous to Eleanor's carefully constructed legacy. Megan found herself drawing on unexpected reserves of assertiveness, her voice steady as she broadcast the final warning. All access attempts are being recorded and transmitted to security monitoring. Law enforcement has been notified of unauthorized access attempts. Please vacate the property immediately to avoid trespassing charges. The escalation to potential legal consequences finally penetrated Michael's determination. On screen, he engaged in brief animated conversation with the increasingly reluctant locksmith before both men returned to their vehicle. Their departure was markedly faster than their approach of the SUV, navigating the snow-covered drive with the haste of retreat rather than the caution of arrival. James allowed himself a small smile of approval. Eleanor would have handled it exactly that way, information control without unnecessary confrontation. You preserved both security and strategic advantage. The compliment felt strangely meaningful coming from this man who had shared Eleanor's confidence for decades. Megan realized she had passed some unspoken test, not just defending the physical property, but demonstrating the judgment Eleanor had apparently identified from afar. Lily watched the departing vehicle with surprising analytical focus for a 12-year-old. He'll try again. Different way next time. Jack nodded, impressed by her assessment. She's right. This was reconnaissance, not his primary attempt. He's gathering information, testing defenses. Now he knows about automated security, but doesn't know about our presence or what we've discovered below. The evaluation highlighted their precarious position. They had knowledge Michael didn't possess, but their physical presence in the remote cabin created vulnerability as well as advantage. If Michael escalated from attempted entry to more aggressive tactics, their isolation could become a liability rather than protection. We need a strategic plan, not just reactive defense. Megan's words emerged with unexpected authority, her mind already shifting from discovery to preservation. We need to protect this place physically while establishing legal safeguards for everything Eleanor built. James led them back to the main corridor, the monitors behind them now showing only empty snow-covered landscape. Eleanor anticipated various scenarios following her death. The ledgers in the vault contain contact information for trusted attorneys, security specialists, financial advisors, people who don't know the full scope but can manage specific aspects without requiring complete disclosure. The comprehensive nature of Eleanor's preparations reinforced the deliberate intent behind her legacy. This wasn't merely accumulated wealth, but a carefully constructed system designed to survive its creator's passing, provided her chosen heir could navigate the transition period successfully. As they returned to the vault, Megan found herself drawn to the main ledger James had mentioned earlier. The volume was substantial, bound in tooled leather, with Eleanor's initials embossed on the cover. Inside, precise handwriting documented not just acquisitions and values, but the philosophy behind each decision, creating a manual for wealth stewardship rather than simple accounting. Between inventory sections lay personal essays addressing specific aspects of wealth management, security protocols, and ethical frameworks. The most recent entry, dated just weeks before Eleanor's death, was addressed directly to Megan, a letter explaining choices made over decades and expectations for the future. To Megan Wilson, my heir and hope. If you're reading this, you've discovered what I've spent a lifetime building. Not merely wealth, but a system to preserve and deploy resources according to principles I believe transcend simple financial return. I've watched you navigate poverty with dignity, prioritizing your daughter's well-being above material comfort or social approval. These choices revealed character consistent with what I valued in your grandmother Rose. Pragmatic compassion, quiet determination, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. The resources now in your care represent both opportunity and burden. Used wisely, they can transform lives beyond your immediate circle. Used carelessly, they will corrupt and ultimately destroy what matters most. Wealth is neither inherently virtuous nor inherently corrupting. It simply magnifies what already exists within its possessor. Trust James Cooper implicitly. He has been my right hand for 40 years, maintaining operational security while I maintain strategic direction. He knows every system, every contingency, every contact worth preserving. Beware the Matthews contingent, particularly Michael. His financial difficulties have grown desperate in recent years, his ethical boundaries increasingly flexible. He suspects wealth exists beyond what is publicly known, but lacks specific knowledge. His persistence will be proportional to his desperation. Move cautiously but decisively in these first months. Establish legal frameworks before revealing assets. Convert physical holdings gradually through trusted channels. Create public narrative that explains sufficient wealth without revealing its full extent. Remember that what appears to be paranoia to the financially secure is simply prudent caution to those who understand wealth's capacity to distort relationships and attract predators. The systems I've built aren't born of fear, but of clear-eyed assessment of human nature when confronted with resources beyond immediate need. You face three immediate challenges: securing physical assets, establishing legal protection, and creating sustainable management systems. The contacts listed in Section 4 can assist with each aspect, operating with limited information on a need-to-know basis. I entrust this legacy to you not because we share blood, though we do, but because we share values that transcend genetic connection. I believe you will protect what I've built while transforming it from a fortress into a foundation, from resources hoarded to resources deployed with purpose. The transition will not be easy or swift. There will be moments when you question whether inheritance is blessing or curse. In those moments, remember that wealth is merely potential energy, neither good nor evil until directed by human intention. Your intention, Megan, is what I'm ultimately investing in. With confidence in your stewardship, Eleanor Matthews. The letter provided context for discoveries that had seemed overwhelming in their suddenness and scale. Eleanor hadn't been merely a wealthy eccentric, but a deliberate architect of legacy, constructing physical and financial infrastructure around core principles she believed transcended her individual life. Megan looked up to find Jack examining the vault's contents with professional assessment rather than personal wonder. His focus had shifted from initial shock to practical implications, his military background evident in how he evaluated security vulnerabilities and defensive capabilities. This can't stay here indefinitely. Too much concentration of physical assets in a single location, despite impressive security. Need to diversify storage while maintaining appropriate legal documentation. His analysis aligned with Eleanor's letter. The need to transition from fortress mentality to strategic deployment without creating new vulnerabilities in the process. The immediate challenge wasn't just protecting what existed, but transforming it into something more sustainable and less isolated. James nodded agreement. Eleanor knew this configuration was transitional, not permanent, designed to survive her death and transfer ownership, but not intended as long-term storage solution. He gestured toward a section of the ledger labeled Transition Protocols. She outlined phased redistribution through secure channels, conversion to more conventional asset classes while maintaining privacy and security. Lily had been exploring the vault with the natural curiosity of youth, examining contents with fingertip precision without actually touching valuable items. Her perspective cut through adult complexities to the fundamental reality of their situation. We can't tell anyone yet, can we? Not even about the cabin, really, because if people know we suddenly have money, they'll want to know where it came from. Her assessment captured the core challenge, the impossibility of explaining sudden wealth without revealing its source and the dangers inherent in exposing Eleanor's accumulated treasure before establishing proper legal protections. The cabin alone would raise questions. The contents beneath it would create a frenzy of attention they were currently unprepared to manage. As they contemplated next steps, a subtle vibration passed through the concrete floor beneath them, not the familiar hum of mechanical systems, but something external, powerful enough to register, despite the bunker's substantial insulation from surface events. Jack moved immediately to the surveillance monitors they'd left in Eleanor's private room, the others following quickly. The screens revealed the source of the disturbance. A large snowplow truck had arrived at the property entrance, clearing the access road with industrial efficiency. James studied the vehicle with narrowed eyes. That's Thomas Wilkins' equipment, county maintenance contractor, but he doesn't clear private roads unless specifically hired. Someone arranged this. Someone who wants access to this property despite the storm. The implications were immediate and concerning. Michael's retreat had been temporary, a tactical withdrawal to arrange more substantial approach. By clearing road access, he was not only facilitating his own return, but potentially opening the property to additional visitors, perhaps official representatives whose authority might override automated security warnings. Jack assessed the situation with military precision. They're establishing access, likely planning return with reinforcements, either legal representation or some pretense of official capacity. We have hours at most before confrontation becomes unavoidable. The timeline compression forced immediate decisions rather than careful planning. Eleanor's meticulous preparations had anticipated various scenarios, but the actual challenges were unfolding at a pace requiring real-time adaptation rather than phased implementation. Megan felt the weight of responsibility settling fully onto her shoulders, not just for the physical assets surrounding them, but for Lily's future security, for Eleanor's legacy intentions, for the trust placed in her stewardship by a woman who had observed from afar for decades before making her final decision. We need to move some of this immediately. Not everything, but enough to establish diversified security. And we need legal representation before Michael returns with whatever strategy he's developing. James nodded approval, already moving toward a section of the vault containing what appeared to be emergency equipment. Eleanor maintained go bags with essential documents, portable assets, communication equipment, designed for scenarios requiring immediate relocation under adverse conditions. He retrieved several sturdy backpacks, their contents unknown, but clearly organized for specific contingencies. Jack examined the cleared road visible on the monitors, calculating timeframes with practiced efficiency. Plows making good progress. Road will be fully accessible within 2 hours. We should assume visitors shortly thereafter. Need to execute whatever movement plan you decide before they arrive. The situation demanded immediate transition from discovery to action, from inheritance to protection. Megan found herself drawing on unexpected reserves of decisive clarity, her mind processing options with focus that surprised even herself. The years of navigating poverty with limited options had apparently created decision-making muscles that now engaged with new purpose. James, what's the most secure way to transport a portion of this to another location immediately? Not everything, just enough to create distributed security rather than concentrated vulnerability. The old man moved to a cabinet near the vault entrance, retrieving what appeared to be facility schematics, detailed drawings of the property including features invisible from the surface. There's a secondary exit tunnel from the east storage section, emerges in a concealed culvert approximately half-mile from the main property entrance. Vehicle could be positioned there in advance for loading without visibility from main approach. The existence of an escape tunnel confirmed Eleanor's comprehensive contingency planning, not merely security against intrusion, but extraction routes for emergency departure. The infrastructure beneath the seemingly simple cabin represented decades of methodical preparation for scenarios ranging from natural disaster to deliberate attack. Jack immediately grasped the tactical advantage this presented. I can position my truck at the secondary exit, transfer essential assets without visibility from main approach. But we need to decide quickly what moves and what stays, and who goes with the assets versus who remains to manage inevitable confrontation here. The question forced clarification of priorities, not just what physical items required immediate protection, but who should engage with Michael's return and who should secure assets away from potential conflict. The decision would shape all subsequent options, establishing the initial framework for legacy protection. Megan glanced at Lily, her daughter's safety superseding all other considerations. Lily goes with the assets, absolutely. Not negotiable. Her gaze shifted between Jack and James, weighing their respective capabilities and knowledge. Jack, you take her, and whatever James identifies as highest priority. Your mechanical skills and military background make you best suited for secure transport. She turned to James, acknowledging his irreplaceable knowledge of Eleanor's systems. James stays with me. We need his operational understanding of the security systems and his history with Eleanor to manage whatever Michael brings to this confrontation. The assignments reflected not just practical assessment, but deeper trust calculations, placing her daughter's safety with a man she'd known less than 48 hours remaining personally to face family conflict rather than accompanying the assets. The decisions revealed prioritization of legacy protection over personal security, of long-term stewardship over immediate comfort. As Jack and James began efficient preparations for implementing the plan, Megan found herself standing before Eleanor's collection of physical wealth, seeing beyond its monetary value to the intentions it represented. This wasn't merely financial security, but responsibility transferred across generations, from one woman who had stood apart from family expectations to another who had navigated similar isolation through different circumstances. The wealth before her represented not just solution to immediate problems, but foundation for transformed purpose. The opportunity to convert survival mode into deliberate impact, to shift from reactive preservation to proactive creation. Eleanor had built a fortress. Megan would transform it into a foundation, maintaining security without isolation, protection without paranoia. Outside, the snowplow continued clearing access to a property whose true values remained invisible beneath pristine white landscape. Beneath layers of carefully constructed security, Eleanor's heir prepared for the first significant test of her stewardship, not just protecting physical assets, but honoring the intentions behind them, navigating transition from isolation to impact, without sacrificing the core principles that had guided their accumulation. The legacy was more than gold bars and gemstones. It was trust transferred, purpose preserved, possibility protected until it could be properly deployed. Megan felt the weight of this understanding settle alongside the practical responsibilities of immediate asset protection, creating dual awareness of present urgency and future potential. In the vault's precise illumination surrounded by physical manifestations of Eleanor's lifetime work, Megan made the transition from inheritor to protector, from beneficiary to steward, from survivor to strategist. The transformation wasn't just about accessing resources, but accepting responsibility for preservation, for protection, and ultimately for purpose beyond simple possession. 6 months transformed both landscape and lives. Spring had yielded to summer mountain snow replaced by wildflowers and birdsong. The cabin remained its exterior unchanged to casual observation, its interior and underground complex now humming with purpose rather than preservation. What Eleanor had built in isolation, Megan was transforming with strategic intention, a fortress evolving into foundation while maintaining necessary security. The Eleanor Matthews Foundation had emerged from careful legal structuring, its public face legitimate but limited, revealing only portions of the actual resources supporting its operations. The official narrative, both acceptable to authorities and plausible to observers, described a modest trust established by a private investor to support single mothers in educational initiatives. Only a handful of carefully vetted professionals understood the true scale of assets being gradually transferred from physical storage to diversified management. Megan stood on the cabin's porch watching sunrise paint the eastern ridge with golden light. 6 months earlier, she had been calculating whether to pay for heat or food. Now she managed resources that could transform thousands of lives while navigating legal challenges, security concerns, and the complex psychology of sudden abundance. The transition had demanded evolution rather than mere adaptation, developing new skills, perspectives, and relationships while maintaining core values that had survived poverty. Inside, the cabin had undergone subtle transformation. Security systems remained but operated alongside communication technology, linking the remote location to foundation operations in the city. The underground complex still housed significant assets, but its inventory had diminished through careful dispersion to more conventional storage managed by trusted financial partners. What remained was substantial but distributed, no longer concentrated in a single vulnerable location. Jack Reynolds had become integral to this transformation, his title, Security and Operations Director, barely capturing his actual role. His military engineering background had proven invaluable in updating Eleanor's systems, creating new protocols appropriate for active deployment rather than static preservation. More surprisingly, his relationship with Megan had evolved beyond professional collaboration, developing depth neither had initially anticipated amid crisis management and asset protection. Lily had blossomed in response to stability and opportunity. At 13, she navigated the transition with remarkable adaptability, treating their new circumstances as adventure rather than entitlement. The practical education she received, accompanying Jack on security assessments, joining Megan in foundation planning, provided context that prevented wealth from becoming abstraction. She understood resources as responsibility rather than privilege, a perspective Eleanor would have approved. The kitchen telephone rang, one of the few concessions to traditional technology in a space now equipped with sophisticated communication systems. The landline remained for specific reasons: its simplicity, its reliability in remote terrain, and most importantly, its status as the contact method known to potential challengers. Calls to this number were automatically recorded, creating documentation of interactions with those who might later claim different conversations had occurred. Megan answered with practiced neutrality, her voice revealing nothing about location or circumstances. The caller's identity registered immediately: Michael Matthews, his tone suggesting renewed confidence since their last confrontation. "We need to talk, cousin. The situation has changed. I'm aware you've established some sort of charitable organization using Eleanor's assets. That creates significant tax implications you may not fully understand. I'm prepared to offer assistance navigating these complexities. For family reasons." His transparent attempt at leveraging presumed ignorance might have worked against the Megan of 6 months ago. Now it revealed more about his limited information than it created vulnerability. His awareness of the foundation, but apparent ignorance of its professional management, confirmed the effectiveness of their information control strategy. Megan maintained the advantage of asymmetrical knowledge. "Thank you for your concern, Michael. The foundation has excellent advisors handling compliance matters. Was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" Her response, neither confrontational nor accommodating, provided no new information while acknowledging nothing beyond what Michael had already revealed knowing. The technique had become second nature over months of managing controlled information flow with various interested parties. Michael's pause suggested recalculation. "I've recently acquired some interesting documents regarding Eleanor's financial history, materials that raise questions about the provenance of certain assets. Could create complications for anyone attempting to establish clear title. Thought we might discuss implications privately as family." The implied threat marked escalation from previous approaches. No longer was Michael merely contesting the will or claiming superior ability to manage assets. Now he suggested potential challenges to the legitimacy of Eleanor's holdings themselves, a strategy targeting foundations of ownership rather than distribution decisions. Megan signaled Jack, silently activating the call speaker function so he could monitor the conversation from across the room. "Where did you obtain these alleged documents, Michael?" The question was calculated to assess whether he possessed actual materials or merely bluffed to provoke revealing responses. His answer would determine immediate counter-strategy. Let's just say Eleanor wasn't as careful in her early years as she became later. Some transactions left paper trails, trails that might interest certain regulatory authorities if brought to their attention. The vagueness suggested limited rather than comprehensive documentation. Likely he had discovered fragments of Eleanor's financial history without context or connection to current assets. Still, even incomplete information could create complications if strategically deployed. Jack moved to the secure laptop they maintained for sensitive research, already accessing files on Michael's recent activities. His expression confirmed what their monitoring systems had suggested. Michael's financial situation had deteriorated further, increasing motivation for desperate measures. Megan maintained controlled engagement. "If you have concerns about documentation, I suggest submitting them through proper legal channels. My attorneys would be happy to review anything you consider relevant." The redirection from personal negotiation to professional evaluation would frustrate Michael's attempt at leveraging private pressure. His response confirmed this assessment, his tone hardening perceptibly. "Attorneys complicate matters that family could resolve directly. I'm offering opportunity to address potential issues privately before they become public record." My financial expertise could help structure solutions beneficial to all parties. A consulting arrangement, perhaps. The thinly veiled proposition amounted to attempted extortion, payment in exchange for suppressing allegedly problematic documentation. Its transparency reflected desperation rather than strategic sophistication. Megan ended the conversation with practiced finality. Any materials you possess should be forwarded to Daniels and Associates. They handle all legal matters regarding Eleanor's estate. If there's nothing else, I have appointments waiting. Michael's response was immediate, his controlled facade cracking slightly. This isn't going away, Megan. You're playing with resources you don't understand, risks you can't calculate. I'm offering protection based on experience you lack. Refuse that protection at your peril. The call ended with his implicit threat hanging unanswered, exactly as their security protocols recommended. Never respond directly to intimidation. Document thoroughly. Assess actual versus implied capability. Prepare countermeasures proportional to credible risk. Jack completed his rapid assessment of Michael's recent activities, the information displayed on secure screens confirming their existing evaluation. His company's on the verge of bankruptcy proceedings. 3 creditors have filed pre-litigation notices in the past month. He's motivationally compromised, desperate rather than merely opportunistic. The analysis placed Michael's threat in proper context, dangerous because desperation increased unpredictability, but limited by his apparent isolation. Their monitoring suggested he operated without significant allies. His siblings, having distanced themselves after earlier confrontations, revealed his methods. Megan activated their secure communication system, connecting with David Miller, the attorney who had managed Eleanor's will and now served as the foundation's chief legal counsel. The call connected with encrypted efficiency, David's response immediate despite the early hour. Michael has escalated to implied documentation threats, claims to possess records questioning asset provenance. Likely fishing expedition rather than substantive evidence, but requires assessment. David's experience with Eleanor's estate created valuable continuity during the transition period. His response reflected both institutional knowledge and strategic thinking. I anticipated this approach. Eleanor documented every transaction meticulously, including context for any unconventional methods during portfolio development. We have countering evidence for any legitimate challenges. What we lack is motivation to engage publicly. His assessment identified the actual vulnerability, not legal exposure, but potential publicity. Even baseless allegations could create undesirable attention to the Foundation's resources, generating questions about scale and source that would complicate their carefully managed public narrative. Megan considered options with the practiced evaluation that had developed through months of progressive challenges. Can we determine what documentation he actually possesses without engaging directly? The question reflected her evolving approach to conflict management, addressing underlying realities rather than surface presentations, gathering actionable intelligence before committing to specific responses. This methodology had transformed her effectiveness in situations that previously would have provoked reactive emotion rather than strategic assessment. David's response came after brief consideration. Patricia Matthews contacted my office yesterday, requesting historical information about Eleanor's investments during the 1970s. Claimed historical research purposes. Timing suggests coordination with Michael, despite their apparent estrangement. I provided nothing substantive, but her inquiry indicates their focus period. The information created actionable context. Patricia's involvement suggested either reconciliation with Michael or independent interest in similar questions. Either scenario complicated previous assumptions about family alignment and information distribution. Jack integrated this new data point with existing intelligence. Patricia visited Michael's office building 3 times last week, according to our monitoring protocols. First documented direct contact in approximately 4 months. Suggests coordination rather than coincidence. The siblings' apparent reconnection after months of separation indicated changing dynamics requiring reassessment. Megan initiated their established protocol for emerging threats. Comprehensive review of vulnerable points related to the specific time period in question, preparation of defensive documentation, and enhanced monitoring of all parties potentially involved in coordinated action. Within hours, their team had assembled comprehensive assessment of Eleanor's financial activities, During the 1970s, the period Patricia had specifically targeted in her inquiry. The documentation revealed nothing illegal but several transactions using alternative banking channels during periods of market volatility, perfectly legitimate strategies that nonetheless might appear suspicious without proper context. James Cooper arrived that afternoon, his regular weekly visit coinciding fortuitously with the emerging situation. At 73, he remained Eleanor's most trusted lieutenant, now transferred to Megan's service with undiminished loyalty. His knowledge of historical operations provided context impossible to extract from documentation alone. Eleanor anticipated this specific vulnerability. He reviewed the assembled files with experienced eyes, identifying key transaction sequences requiring contextual explanation. During the banking crisis of 73, she moved significant assets through Swiss intermediaries before financial regulations changed. Completely legal at execution, but potentially questionable under retrospective interpretation without proper documentation of timing and intent. His institutional knowledge highlighted the actual vulnerability, not illegality, but appearance that could be manipulated through selective presentation. The solution emerged from Eleanor's characteristic thoroughness. James retrieved additional documentation from his personal archives, contemporaneous memoranda explaining strategic decisions, communications with financial advisors, establishing intent, even newspaper clippings providing market context for timing decisions. She documented everything with precisely this scenario in mind, anticipated that transactions legitimate in context could be weaponized through decontextualization by opportunistic challengers. The comprehensive documentation transformed potential vulnerability into opportunity. Rather than merely defending against selective disclosure, they could now present complete narrative, demonstrating sophisticated financial strategy and meticulous compliance, effectively neutralizing Michael's implied threat by embracing full transparency on their terms rather than responding to piecemeal allegations. Megan authorized immediate implementation of their counter-strategy preparation of comprehensive documentation packages addressing the specific period proactive outreach to regulatory authorities establishing cooperative transparency and strategic communication with Patricia Matthews, offering direct access to historical records without Michael's interpretive filtering. By separating Patricia from Michael's influence, they created potential fracture in the siblings' apparent alliance while demonstrating confident openness that undermined any implication of concealment. The approach reflected Megan's evolving philosophy of strategic management, addressing root dynamics rather than surface symptoms, converting potential threats into relationship opportunities where possible. The following day brought confirmation of their strategy's effectiveness when Patricia Matthews requested private meeting without Michael's knowledge or involvement. The encounter was arranged at neutral location with appropriate security protocols, including recording capabilities and professional witnesses, ensuring documentation of all exchanges. Patricia arrived alone, her demeanor suggesting internal conflict rather than confrontational intent. Her opening statement confirmed their assessment of familial dynamics. "I'm not working with Michael despite appearances. I'm trying to prevent him from self-destructing through increasingly desperate measures." The distinction created opportunity for differentiated engagement, treating Patricia as potential ally in managing Michael's behavior rather than as coordinated opponent. Megan maintained appropriate boundaries while acknowledging the shared interest in preventing destructive escalation. Michael believes Eleanor acquired certain assets through questionable methods during the 70s. He's fixated on finding documentation he thinks could force financial concessions from you. I accessed his office trying to determine exactly what he's found and what he's planning. Patricia's apparent cooperation required careful verification, but potentially offered valuable insight into Michael's specific information and intentions rather than merely his general approach. The intelligence value justified conditional engagement while maintaining appropriate skepticism. Megan offered measured response. What exactly has Michael discovered that he believes provides leverage? Patricia produced copies of documents, transaction records from disbanded Swiss banking institutions showing significant gold purchases during periods of market volatility, property acquisitions through corporate intermediaries, and movement of assets through jurisdictions experiencing regulatory transitions. Without context, the activities might suggest sophisticated tax avoidance rather than legitimate financial strategy during turbulent economic periods. He found these in Robert's archives. Apparently, Eleanor sent occasional updates to her youngest brother during that period, perhaps maintaining minimal family connection. Robert kept everything, but never examined it carefully until Michael went searching after the will reading. The information source explained both the documentation's existence outside Eleanor's controlled archives and its incomplete nature, fragments without the contextual explanation that would establish legitimate purpose in execution. Meghan maintained strategic balance between transparency and protection. Those transactions were fully documented and compliant with regulations applicable when executed. Eleanor maintained comprehensive records explaining context, purpose, and compliance verification for every significant financial movement throughout her career. Patricia's expression revealed genuine relief rather than tactical response. That's what I hoped. Michael's interpretation seemed selectively negative, ignoring legitimate explanations for strategies that appeared unusual without proper context. The conversation continued with increasing productivity, Patricia gradually revealing more about Michael's deteriorating financial position, his desperate search for leverage against Eleanor's estate, and his increasingly erratic decision-making as pressures mounted. The intelligence value justified continued engagement while maintaining appropriate verification protocols for all information provided. As the meeting concluded, Patricia offered unexpected perspective on Eleanor's legacy choices. I never understood why Eleanor chose you until watching Michael's response to being excluded. His behavior these past months has demonstrated exactly why she made that decision. He views wealth as power rather than responsibility. You appear to understand the distinction. The observation suggested potential ally rather than persistent adversary, someone recognizing legitimacy in Eleanor's selection despite initial disappointment at personal exclusion. Meghan acknowledged the perspective without overcommitting to alliance that remained unverified through action. When Patricia departed, the security team conducted standard verification of all information provided, confirming key elements while identifying areas requiring additional investigation. The process reflected their established protocol, treating all information as potentially valuable but unverified until independently confirmed, regardless of apparent cooperation or alignment. Jack's assessment crystallized their strategic position. We've gained valuable intelligence about Michael's specific documentation and approach. Patricia appears genuinely concerned about his trajectory rather than actively supporting it. But her involvement creates both opportunity and complication, potential ally, but also additional variable in already complex situation. The evaluation accurately captured their evolving challenge. No longer simple defense against direct threats, but management of multiple stakeholders with varying motivations, information levels, and potential impacts on their core mission of legacy protection and deployment. 2 days later, their monitoring systems detected significant development. Michael had approached regulatory authorities with selective documentation, attempting to initiate investigation into Eleanor's historical financial activities. The predictable escalation triggered their prepared countermeasures, immediate proactive contact with the same authorities providing comprehensive, contextual documentation, demonstrating legitimate strategy rather than questionable methods. David Miller coordinated their response with characteristic efficiency, leveraging established relationships with regulatory offices to ensure proper contextualization of Michael's selective disclosures. Eleanor's meticulous record-keeping transformed potential vulnerability into demonstration of exceptional compliance. Documentation so comprehensive, it established not just technical adherence, but commitment to ethical execution beyond minimum requirements. Within a week, regulatory review confirmed their assessment. No basis for investigation beyond standard verification protocols, which their proactive disclosure had already satisfied. Michael's attempt at creating external pressure had effectively backfired, establishing official record of compliance that strengthened their position rather than creating vulnerability as he had intended. The Foundation's work continued expanding throughout this period, its programs for supporting single mothers, educational initiatives, and community development gaining recognition despite deliberately modest public profile. Meghan had implemented Eleanor's philosophy with important modifications, maintaining privacy regarding total resources while creating genuine impact through targeted programs addressing needs she understood from personal experience rather than theoretical assessment. The foundation's headquarters occupied a renovated warehouse in the city's transitioning industrial district, a location selected for practical accessibility to serve populations rather than prestigious address. The facility combined program space, administrative offices, and community resources within security parameters designed by Jack to provide protection without creating institutional atmosphere. The balance reflected their evolving philosophy, maintaining necessary safeguards while rejecting Eleanor's isolation in favor of engaged deployment. Megan divided her time between this urban hub and the mountain cabin, which remained both retreat and command center for sensitive operations. The dual locations created operational flexibility while maintaining connection to Eleanor's legacy without becoming imprisoned by her methods. The adaptation reflected Megan's core innovation, honoring inherited wisdom while evolving implementation to address changed circumstances and expanded purpose. The Foundation's first major public initiative, a comprehensive support program for single mothers transitioning from public assistance to sustainable employment, drew attention from community organizations and local officials. The program's effectiveness derived from Megan's personal understanding of the challenges involved creating practical solutions for barriers she had experienced directly, rather than theoretical interventions designed without lived experience of the problems being addressed. Lily had become unofficially involved in program development, her perspective as child of single-parent household providing valuable insights regarding family impacts of various support structures. Her contributions reflected growing maturity and developing social consciousness, transforming her own experience of hardship into valuable perspective for helping others navigate similar challenges with greater support. Jack had established security protocols that balanced necessary protection with community engagement, creating environments that felt welcoming rather than fortress-like, while maintaining appropriate safeguards for staff participants and resources. His approach reflected professional expertise influenced by growing personal investment in the Foundation's mission, technical skills deployed in service of human-centered objectives rather than abstract security metrics. The Foundation's expanding operations inevitably increased public visibility despite their modest profile strategy. Local media began requesting interviews, community partners sought information about funding capacity, and various officials expressed interest in potential collaboration opportunities. The attention created both opportunity and challenge, increasing potential impact while potentially exposing more information about resources than their controlled narrative had previously revealed. Amid this complex balancing of security impact and strategic growth, Michael Matthews executed his most aggressive escalation, filing formal lawsuit alleging fraudulent concealment of assets during estate proceedings, claiming Eleanor had been manipulated during declining health and demanding comprehensive financial disclosure through legal discovery processes. The legal attack represented significant threat not through its merit, but through its potential for forcing disclosure beyond their controlled narrative. Even baseless litigation created discovery mechanisms that could compel information revelation regardless of case validity, potentially exposing the full scale of Eleanor's accumulated resources before their carefully structured protection systems were completely implemented. David Miller assembled crisis response team immediately, their strategy sessions focusing on containing disclosure requirements while preparing substantive defense against allegations that professional assessment deemed weak on merit, but potentially damaging through procedural mechanisms. The situation demanded integrated approach, combining legal defense, public relations management, and operational security during potentially extended litigation process. Megan maintained strategic perspective despite emotional impact of such direct attack. This isn't about winning legal judgment. It's about forcing disclosure through discovery. Michael's desperate enough to sacrifice reputation and resources just to confirm what he suspects about the actual scale of Eleanor's assets. The assessment accurately identified the actual, rather than apparent objective, focusing response on the genuine, rather than presented threat. Their counter-strategy emerged from this clarity. Aggressive challenge to discovery scope, jurisdictional objections to venue selection, and procedural motions designed to require Michael to demonstrate threshold merit before obtaining significant disclosure access. While legal processes advanced at institutional pace, Michael implemented parallel strategy through media channels, providing selective information to journalists, suggesting impropriety in Eleanor's financial history, and questioning Foundation's transparency regarding funding sources. The approach represented classic asymmetrical leverage attempt, using public attention to create pressure that formal processes might not generate independently. Meghan convened emergency planning session with their core team, addressing integrated response to multi-channel attack rather than separate reactions to legal and media components. The situation demanded coherent strategy, addressing both formal and informal pressures while maintaining focus on foundation operations despite external distractions. Jack framed their fundamental choice with characteristic clarity. We can maintain complete privacy at cost of allowing damaging narrative to develop unchallenged, or we can implement controlled disclosure that presents our narrative affirmatively while accepting certain transparency beyond our original timeline. Defensive silence versus offensive transparency. The analysis captured their essential strategic decision, whether to prioritize maximum information protection despite reputational damage or to accept calibrated disclosure that maintained narrative control while revealing more than their original timeline had intended. Either approach involves significant trade-offs requiring careful evaluation rather than reactive response. Meghan considered the options through framework that had evolved during her leadership transition, balancing Eleanor's values with necessary adaptation to changed circumstances. Eleanor built walls to protect resources for future deployment. We're already deploying those resources. Our mission now requires relationship more than isolation. The perspective shift crystallized their strategic direction. Controlled transparency rather than defensive secrecy, proactive narrative rather than reactive response engagement rather than isolation. The approach would require carefully calibrated disclosure beyond their original timeline, but would maintain essential protection of core resources while advancing their actual mission rather than merely defending inherited structures. David Miller implemented this strategy through targeted legal maneuvers, offering voluntary disclosure of specific foundation financials that demonstrated legitimate scale without revealing full resource extent, proposing settlement terms, requiring mutual non-disparagement and information control, and filing counterclaims, addressing demonstrably false public statements, damaging the foundation's legitimate operations. Simultaneously, Jack enhanced security protocols at both mountain and urban locations, implementing contingency measures for potential escalation scenarios, ranging from media intrusion to desperate direct action, as Michael's financial and legal positions deteriorated further. The preparations reflected professional thoroughness rather than paranoid overreaction, appropriate precautions based on evolving threat assessment rather than fearful withdrawal. Meghan addressed media inquiries through limited but substantive engagement, providing verified information about foundation programs and governance, while declining specific financial disclosures during pending litigation. The approach demonstrated confidence and transparency regarding mission while maintaining appropriate boundaries around information subject to legal proceedings. Patricia Matthews became an unexpected ally during this period, providing crucial intelligence about Michael's deteriorating personal situation and increasingly erratic behavior as financial pressures mounted and legal options narrowed. Her cooperation appeared motivated by genuine concern about potential family damage rather than self-interest, though their protocols maintained appropriate verification of all information regardless of apparent alignment. The Foundation continued expanding effective programs throughout this challenging period, their operational focus providing both practical impact and strategic advantage, demonstrating through action the legitimate purpose being served rather than merely defending against accusations. The approach converted potential vulnerability into opportunity for mission advancement, transforming defensive posture into affirmative demonstration of Eleanor's legacy properly deployed. 3 weeks into this integrated response strategy, their monitoring systems detected significant development. Michael had approached Foundation offices directly bypassing legal representatives and security protocols in apparent attempt at personal confrontation. The behavior suggested increasing desperation as formal channels failed to produce desired leverage or information access. Jack implemented established protocol for such situations, respectful but firm security presence, documented interaction without engagement beyond necessary boundaries, and appropriate witness presence ensuring accurate record of any exchange. The approach maintained both physical security and evidential protection without creating unnecessarily confrontational atmosphere that might escalate already volatile situation. Michael's appearance confirmed concerns about his deteriorating stability. Unshaven and disheveled, he projected aggressive confidence, contradicted by observable physical cues, suggesting extreme stress and possible substance influence. His demand for immediate meeting with Megan was declined through established procedures, offering scheduled appointment through proper channels rather than unplanned confrontation without appropriate representation. His response revealed genuine rather than tactical desperation. "You don't understand what's happening. I need resolution now, not next week. The company's being liquidated Friday if I don't secure bridge financing. Everything my father built, everything I've managed for 20 years, gone because Eleanor decided to play favorites with resources that should have supported family first." The outburst provided crucial context for his escalating behaviors. Not merely opportunistic asset-seeking, but desperate attempt to salvage failing family business using resources he believed should have been available through familial obligation rather than legal determination. The distinction didn't justify his methods, but explained their increasingly erratic and aggressive nature as specific deadline approached. Security personnel maintained professional protocol despite emotional display documenting interaction while providing appropriate departure options without unnecessary confrontation or embarrassment. Their approach reflected core values Megan had established, maintaining necessary boundaries without punitive or vindictive elements, addressing security requirements without dehumanizing even adversarial individuals. The incident triggered immediate strategy reassessment, incorporating newly confirmed information about specific financial collapse timeline, driving Michael's increasingly desperate measures. His company's imminent liquidation created both heightened risk of extreme action and potential opportunity for comprehensive resolution through appropriately structured intervention, addressing root cause rather than merely symptoms of conflict. Megan convened emergency session with core advisors developing integrated approach to transform situation. Michael's facing specific financial deadline rather than merely seeking opportunistic leverage. That changes both threat profile and potential resolution parameters. We need comprehensive strategy addressing actual motivation rather than merely presented demands. The perspective reflected her evolved leadership approach, identifying underlying dynamics rather than surface presentations, addressing root causes rather than symptoms, converting potential conflict into opportunity for constructive resolution where appropriate alignment existed beneath superficial opposition. After thorough evaluation, they implemented unprecedented approach, offering Michael structured financial intervention through independent business restoration specialists rather than direct foundation involvement, contingent upon comprehensive legal release of all claims, professional management installation at his company, and stringent governance protocols, ensuring appropriate business practices moving forward. The proposal represented neither capitulation to pressure nor punitive response to aggression, but strategic intervention addressing legitimate business preservation while establishing appropriate boundaries and accountability measures. It acknowledged valid concern for preserving family business legacy without rewarding inappropriate methods or establishing precedent for future pressure tactics. Michael's initial response reflected suspicion regarding motivation and terms, questioning whether offer represented genuine resolution opportunity or sophisticated trap designed to increase his vulnerability. The reaction demonstrated persistent adversarial perspective despite deteriorating position and limited alternatives. David Miller managed subsequent negotiations with characteristic precision, maintaining balance between addressing legitimate business preservation concerns and establishing necessary protections against future exploitation or misrepresentation. The process required multiple iterations addressing specific terms, verification mechanisms, and implementation timelines before reaching provisional agreement subject to comprehensive documentation and formal execution. Throughout these intense negotiations, the Foundation's daily operations continued expanding, effective community programs maintaining focus on mission fulfillment rather than becoming consumed by conflict management. The operational continuity reflected core priority, protecting Eleanor's legacy not merely as financial resources, but as transformative potential being actively realized through practical implementation. Patricia and Robert Matthews provided crucial support during final negotiation phases, their involvement creating family context for resolution that acknowledged shared interest in business preservation while establishing appropriate governance, ensuring future stability. Their participation transformed transaction from adversarial settlement into collaborative family legacy protection with appropriate structural safeguards. The final agreement structure reflected sophisticated integration of multiple objectives, preserving legitimate family business through appropriate financial intervention, establishing governance, protecting all stakeholders' interests, and creating comprehensive conflict resolution, preventing future challenges or misrepresentations regarding Eleanor's estate and intentions. Implementation began immediately following formal execution, with professional management team conducting comprehensive assessment of business operations, financial position, and restoration requirements. The intervention represented neither blank check nor punitive restructuring, but calibrated support addressing legitimate business fundamentals while establishing appropriate accountability mechanisms, ensuring responsible stewardship moving forward. As resolution implementation progressed, Megan reflected on the transformation their approach represented. From Eleanor's isolation protecting resources from family exploitation to strategic engagement preserving family legacy while maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations. The evolution honored Eleanor's core values while adapting implementation methods to address changed circumstances and expanded mission perspective. Jack summarized their evolved philosophy with characteristic precision. Eleanor built walls because she couldn't trust family with resources. You've built bridges while maintaining necessary boundaries, protecting assets without rejecting relationship entirely. Different method, same core purpose. Responsible stewardship. The observation captured essential transition they had navigated, from preservation through isolation to protection through strategic engagement, from resources guarded against family to resources deployed for community, while addressing legitimate family concerns through appropriate structures rather than either blanket rejection or unconditional support. 6 months into the Foundation's public operations, 1 year since discovering Eleanor's legacy, Megan stood again on the cabin porch watching mountain sunrise. The physical location remained unchanged, but its meaning had transformed from fortress to foundation, headquarters from isolation to connection point. Lily emerged from the cabin to join her, the teenager's growth, both physical and psychological, evident in her confident presence. The Foundation's everything Aunt Eleanor couldn't create herself. The impact she wanted without the isolation she accepted. We're completing what she started, not just protecting what she built. Inside, Jack reviewed security protocols, his relationship with Megan having developed depth neither had anticipated when crisis first connected them. James Cooper still visited regularly, his approval of their operational evolution, providing crucial validation that the transformation honored, rather than betrayed, the legacy entrusted to Megan's stewardship. The Eleanor Matthews Foundation had established public identity, balancing appropriate privacy with genuine community engagement. Michael Matthews had withdrawn from active opposition following business intervention, while Patricia and Robert had developed cautiously collaborative relationships with the Foundation, appropriately bounded by formal agreements. Jack summarized their evolved philosophy with characteristic precision. Eleanor built walls because she couldn't trust family with resources. You've built bridges while maintaining necessary boundaries, protecting assets without rejecting relationship entirely. Different method, same core purpose. Responsible stewardship. As morning light illuminated the mountain landscape, Megan recognized the journey's essential nature, transforming preservation into purpose, isolation into engagement. Eleanor's true gift had been not merely financial assets but perspective opportunity, chance to transform survival mindset into strategic purpose. The Foundation represented Eleanor's legacy, finding fulfillment rather than merely continuation, embracing possibility that Eleanor herself had protected but never fully deployed.